So this morning I'm going to go and see Luke and Harmony, the guys I chatted to last month about Time Capital, about their farm. I'm actually going up the valley to visit them today. I'm trying out my new GoPro, which is all very difficult and different for me. One of the things that I'm really struggling with this video making is trying to connect with you guys as the audience more, and I'm trying to learn how to tell this story in a way that, you know, makes it more approachable for you guys to understand and to see my life and how I'm doing things. It's just so awkward. You know, I never thought I would be this kind of person who filmed their mundane stupid things, but I guess a girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. Okay, Cheryl, we'll talk to you again. Okay, bye. Yeah, you too, bye. When I started my journey learning how to grow my own food, I was at a loss at how to even get started, and I didn't even know how to read nature around me. And it was with meeting people and catching up and chatting with others that I slowly learned to put on these special pair of glasses that allowed me to actually see the patterns and the structures of the environment that I am living in, and start to understand and comprehend how to start fitting together pieces of the puzzle to build my own garden according to the structures around me. I know how overwhelming it is when you're trying to work out what are you going to do, what are you going to grow. I know that people feel at a loss as even how to start. I know how that feels because I've been there, and I certainly haven't got all of the answers. I I don't know all of the ways of growing things, but I have so much better understanding of what's going on around me, and I have a set of glasses that I can put on that when I look at a piece of land, I can read it and I can make assumptions and judgments according to what I understand from the information I'm learning, what is going to grow there and how to grow that thing.
Hello, how are you today? So good girl. This is Macy. So good girl.
It's a bit too hot. Sorry, I'm just fiddling around here. You guys get to be my guinea pigs, where I'm learning how to do all of this still.
Good. Well, my guinea pig for lunch. I made a Pigeon Pea, which I've never done before.
Sounds awesome to me.
So look, I'll experiment. Not a good idea when you've got this bug.
I love it. Just experiment away, honestly. Okay. No, leave them, they're great. Really?
Good, flush the salad.
Yeah. Cool. So, we'll just keep it super cash because I'm trying to learn to be less intense. So,
I can relate to that.
yeah. So let's just start with this section. So guys, can you tell me a little bit about this spot here? Like, you know, from a bird's eye perspective, you know, why did you pick this spot here in this area? So,
for the house or for the land?
For the land,
big,
yeah.
Big land picture?
So tell us a bit, where are we situated
Okay.
in the scope of
How
North
it all
Queensland,
works.
kind of
Yeah.
all the way down to here? Why
Well,
here?
I'd lived in a lot of different places, and I decided that when I was going to settle down, I wanted certain things about the land, and I wrote a list. And I wanted the land first to have fresh water, because fresh water is really important, so it was on the top of my list, fresh water. I wanted it to be fairly close to town, like an hour, you know, from town. 2 hours is getting a bit too far, so, you know, an hour from town. I wanted, and it was all idealistic type of things. I wanted gravity-fed water, so I wanted a hill on the place.
How did you even know all of this stuff? How did you know that's what you wanted?
Oh, because I used to live up in Cooktown. I lived up in the rainforest in Cooktown.
Right, okay.
And up there we're in the forest, and it was very enclosed, and I didn't want to have to chop the forest down to grow my garden.
Okay.
So I wanted land that was already relatively cleared. Didn't matter whether it was cane or whatever it was, that it was already cleared. And of course water, I'd experienced water before. We had to get water onto our block, so to have a hill behind us where we can get gravity fed was, from experience, these were the things that, you know, I knew that we needed to have. And so the list was fairly comprehensive because it was my wish list. You know, I wanted it close to National Park as well, because I didn't want the water coming all through, you know, cows and things like that, so I wanted it fairly close. The wish list was really quite long. And when I saw this place, I was on the other side of the river, and I pulled out my wish list, and it had, I just like went tick, 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 and actually never went and had a look at another place, never saw another place.
Wow.
Because it had everything that I needed on my list. And when I did attempt to go and see another place up in Youngler, which was like 2 hours drive, we got 2 flat tyres and overheated.
This is the story of your guys' life, though. It's like, just finding these awesome pathways. It's amazing.
Yes, I think you have to have an idea of what you want, and then you be flexible and see what comes your way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you know, the whole concept too, that unless you know what you want, how are you going to get it?
Yes.
So,
yeah,
we've got to have some idea.
Well, I think, you know, something I really struggle with is, you know, writing down very clearly what I want. So you have to really know yourself in order to know what you even want. I know on our block of land, when we bought it, I just didn't even think about water as a permanent thing, you know. I didn't even know that's what I wanted. And it's so much easier to go in with all of the things in place rather than retrofitting to try and find it later on. And that's a real challenge. So tell me.
I suppose I just add to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose with my permaculture training and understanding, it's kind of like all the questions that I would ask a client if I was, if they were going looking at various blocks of land. There are certain, parameters and guides and within sort of the permaculture movement. And it was kind of like when Harmony brought me here to have a look at this place, I was going through my checklist of, logic, permaculture principles and things like that, and it was basically checking off Harmony's wish list. Both lists were pretty well exactly the same.
Yeah. What would you say to a person when they're trying to write their own wish list? Could you give them any places to go and look, or how to come up with those ideas? Is this too hard of a question? I don't know.
I suppose the through sharing knowledge. So that's one of the things that Harmony and I do here is we're constantly running workshops. Yeah. And I suppose the introduction to permaculture workshop gives people a foundation to start from.
Absolutely.
With their their designing process, because permaculture is a design science. You're not necessarily sitting there with a piece of paper and drawing your garden. Yes, that's part of it, but the actual, the design science comes in at another dimension or another layer in that you're designing your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay, and so it's kind of like, well, how do I want to live my life? All right, well then, jot all those things down, and then that list then gets incorporated into the picture plan.
Yeah.
Of the design. So, in a way, it's kind of like a chickens and eggs and horses and carts. It's as much of a self-awareness, spiritual awakening process
absolutely.
as it is a science-based design process.
Absolutely.
Because, often we don't know what it is that we want. I find I have more of an idea what I don't want.
Yeah.
So I can say, okay, I don't want to live in a rainforest again. I don't want that, I don't want to, and learning from other people who have got, huge rocks in their land. I don't want to live on a place that's really rocky where I can't dig a hole.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Yes. So sometimes it is hard to know what we do want, but sometimes it's very easy to work out what we don't want.
Yes,
in our life.
Absolutely. That's a cool way to put it, because everyone's good at saying what they hate about their life or what they don't want to do. I know it's a much easier way, but having connection, like you're talking about, Luke, coming up to the farm here and learning from you guys, it's 2 days out of your life, and maybe even a day out of your life, for years and years worth of not having to make those mistakes that you have to fix up later on.
That's right.
What's the principle in permaculture? 90 hours of planning, 10 hours of
physical work.
10 hours of physical work.
Sit down and think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sit down and think about it, and the longer you ponder it and work out, I suppose it's like the least amount of work for the maximum effect.
Absolutely.
For the most maximum outcome, but to do the least amount of work in order to achieve it.
When I was driving in, coming up the road, I was watching as the mountains, first you have these rolling cane fields and these mountains coming up, and then the big sky, and then it narrows down to the road, and you come across the creek, and then you're coming into your place. And it's like it just tucks straight into the landscape, but yet it's completely thought out. It's designed, and it's designed to be tucked into the landscape, to be connected. And that it looks in some ways very natural, but at the same time it's very thought out. It's very considered how you've laid this out, and it fits into the bigger patterns and that sort of thing. And I think sometimes, like I know for myself, when you're overwhelmed with information, you know, when the space is so big or there's so many options, to have a framework to put that together is it's like gold, you know. It's worth it, you know. So I wanted to talk about more focus now a bit on soil health. This month we're talking about living capital, and you guys are surrounded by living capital. So living capital is everything, you know, the trees, the creeks, the sun, and all of that sort of stuff. Even our own bodies is living capital. What I really wanted to talk to you guys though about is soil health, and soil as the foundation, I guess, of what everything comes from. So Harmony, you sort of started talking briefly before about how, you know, it's a difficult topic. Can you?
It is a difficult topic, and I just connected back to where we were a minute ago with planning things. Now, we always intended to have chooks, but for me, chooks are workers. They actually produce my soil for me.
Right.
So it was maybe 2 or 3 years before we got our chooks. And people would come and they'd say, oh, come on, let's just put a chook pen together. Come on, we'll just put it in. And it was like, no. We actually took us 2 or 3 years to plan how to build the chook house so they could be good, efficient workers for us to manage to make a soil.
So taking a couple of steps back there, you said before, you know, there's dangers with bringing soil into your landscape. So can you just tell us the different ways you guys make soil? Like you mentioned chooks, so that's one of the ways you make soil. Can you list out what other ways you make soil, and then maybe break down how each of those processes work?
Luke would be the one for that one.
So tell me all the ways you make soil on your farm.
Okay, so I'm glad you've said all the ways, because when we're dealing with natural systems, multiple avenues is generally the regarded way to do things. There's not really one answer or one particular type of compost that's going to do all of our soil building. So we do this, I suppose, concentrated and I call them, you know, sort of intensive systems of building our soil and making compost, making soil. At this stage, because we don't have our cows yet, I do rely on an external source of manure. Okay, so I've had a relationship with a local horse stable in town where I collect bags of horse manure. And so basically and they come in, you know, the old feed bags, relatively easy to handle and manage. But basically what we do with those is, on arrival, they literally go into the chook yard for the chooks to actually process that, pull it apart, eat all the bugs and things out of the poo. You know, if there's any, you know, sometimes the bags are fly blown, and the chickens just love that.
So they'll eat the maggots.
They'll eat the maggots, so it increases the protein in our egg supply. And basically, after a year of going into town once a week, once every 10 days to collect the horse manure, bring it back here, put it through the chook yard. We've just harvested 3 to 4 cubic metres of black gold soil. So that's one way. We do weeds in bins as a compost, so composting, just a normal simple composting process.
So you don't burn your weeds, you don't take them off your place and chuck them in the wheelie bins or anything like that?
No. The weeds to us are actually quite a valuable asset.
And why is that?
They're generally very good miners of minerals. And so we actually use plants to bring minerals up from deep down in the soil, to bring those minerals up into their leaves. As we evolve, I'll be taking those liquid fertilisers to the next level, where we start working with ferments and aeration to improve their quality.
But you've been doing this for years now. Like, you've been gardening for years in terms of, you're saying evolve into liquid fertilisers. Like, basically you're saying you don't need to be doing all the complicated things. You just need to be doing what you know, and then until you're ready.
Anything you do is going to be doing better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it takes time to develop the knowledge of what it is that you actually require.
Absolutely.
And then where to put it, how it's going to work in with the rest of the system, and with the understanding that there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
We haven't had a lot of electricity power. So I can't easily just go and flick a switch and have a pump, a circulating pump going for 48 hours to aerate a compost tea. As soon as I've got enough power, well then it'll be, okay, now I can crank up my compost tea manufacturing and process a lot more and have it a lot higher value.
I had a chat with a friend of mine, Lynette, and she did a bit of a composting workshop. I think a lot of people think about composting and they just get freaked out. Like, because they think it's too complicated, too hard, I can't do it. And people have tried, the hot composting method and failed and different things like that. But my friend Lynette said to me one day, it doesn't matter what you do. There's no specific recipe. Just put it all together into a pile, and put any organic matter together in a pile, and that's composting. And I love that concept. For those of us who are scared of touching it, that's one simple way. We have at our place, our composting process is similar to yours. We have a chook pen, and everything just goes into the chook pen, and when it gets too sloppy, we chuck a bit of hay out on top of the ground, and then we just let it go. And then by the end of 6 months or whatever, we can be starting to pull that stuff out. Usually once a year I do realistically do it, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
No.
Yeah.
No. Probably the main way that we actually build soil here, and this is particularly relative to areas that grow plants quickly and well, so the subtropics, tropics, is actually by basically growing biomass to chop it down and lay it down as a mulch. So mulching is probably, there's composting, which is high-end soil building, but then most of our soil building is basically happening relatively passively, where we're growing biomass and chopping it down and laying it on the ground.
Right.
And then those plants that we've chopped down, there are a particular selection of plants that grow back very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do it. I can potentially chop down one plant 3 times in a year.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me like a list of your top 3 plants that would perform that role in your garden?
Okay, so probably the primary one that I use is a plant called Pigeon Pea,
Mm-hmm.
Cajanus cajan, perennial legume bush,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a massive biomass producer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm basically growing that. Yes, we get seed from it. We can have a dal from the pulse that we can harvest from it. But basically, growing that to chop it down. Every time we chop it, it releases nitrogen into, the accumulated nitrogen on its root system into the soil,
Mm-hmm.
and the rotting roots is building the soil. So it's just it's the way nature builds soil.
Mm-hmm.
By a tree growing in the forest and slowly dropping leaves and dropping branches, and bit by bit you build up the soil. We're taking that understanding, but I suppose we're just speeding it up by using a special selection of plants, chop them down. So that chopping them down and laying them down is the same as what's happening in the forest. It's just sped up.
Faster.
So Pigeon Pea, arrowroot is another good one, Queensland arrowroot. For sweet potato as a living mulch.
Mm-hmm.
You get those tendrils, and layer upon layer upon layer is gradually building the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So different plants for different functions in the garden. So I'll be using different plant selection in my food forest orchard than what I would be in my Zone 1 garden.
Right.
Yeah.
So essentially what that's doing is replacing going out and buying mulch, or like going and buying it out in the field sort of thing, like hay or like chip bark or whatever, wood chip, and you're growing your own mulch on your own place, and you're producing it all yourself.
Yeah, basically in amongst
the
living system, the plants that are there to be mulched.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
So they're growing all in amongst it, and I just come through.
Or in amongst the productive plants.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that all the plants in the garden are either edibles or support for those edibles.
Yeah.
And in some circumstances, like the pigeon pea, which might grow to a bush that's 5 foot, 6 foot. But then, with a pair of secateurs, I can easily shrink that down. And I can use the same concept, the same understanding with trees that grow to 30, 40 foot.
Right.
So different stages, and they're obviously massive biomass producers.
Yeah.
And when I chop those down, I'm laying down logs in the garden. That's when, since I've started doing that, the amount of fungi that's creeping through the garden now, as opposed to 10 years ago when we first started, there was very little fungi around. Now that I've been laying wood down on the ground, the fungi is massively increasing. So it's all organic material, and it's basically a cycle that just keeps feeding itself.
So another question that I have is soil amendments. Do you have a list of your top 3 soil amendments that you would use, as in stuff that you can't produce off of your own place that you would bring in to add to the soil?
I don't use them.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And why?
I have an understanding, and I don't know whether it can be scientifically backed up, but my personal understanding is that if we can assist nature in creating a hugely diverse, live, living organic soil, which has microbiology, bacteria, fungi, all of the humus, all of the essentials for the best possible soil, it doesn't need things added to it. You might look at a plant and somebody says, oh, it's suffering from a lack of potassium.
Right.
Okay? That doesn't actually mean there's no potassium in the soil.
Right.
What that means is, A, there's no potassium in the soil, or B, there isn't the right microbiology and bacteria and soil health to assist the tree in accessing the potassium that's in the soil.
Right.
By purely focusing on build the soil to be as diverse and complex organic life and living system, then it will look after it itself.
Yeah.
It will
create that necessary
It will-
pH
yeah.
balance to,
Right.
That's right.
fix that, whatever that plant is that it needs.
Right.
So often we see people who add things to their soil and all they're doing is drug addicted plants.
Right.
They've got to keep putting this on it or else the plant won't survive. We've seen a fellow gave us an aloe vera, and it was the most mutant aloe vera you'd seen because he believed it needed something to make it healthy.
He was watering it and fertilising it, and it basically mutated to this because it doesn't require
Any of that.
a lot of water, and it doesn't require a lot of
We
nutrients.
popped him down in the garden. It had all these abnormal pups on it. We put him in the garden. It took quite a few years of us just leaving it there, giving it nothing, for it to come back to a normal looking aloe vera.
Mutant aloe veras, who would have thought? that is.
So, I mean, building soil is through biomass.
Right.
I mean, that's what soil is broken down
It's so
trees.
simple. It's so simple when you put it that way. And, my goal for everyone who's listening is that they know and understand deep in their hearts that it's not a complicated science to build soil. It's been doing it on its own for billions of years.
14.4 billion. Oh, maybe not 14, but yeah, 4 billion odd years.
But we as humans can come into that and speed that process up,
We
basically.
can speed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I say that I don't bring anything in, I may every now and then get a bit of dusting sulphur, but I'm directing that directly towards the pawpaws, our papayas, and of course that will dust out and will increase the sulphur in the area a little bit.
So how did you identify that need in that particular situation?
There is quite a lot of, I suppose, scientific research, for pawpaw growers, through the agricultural and horticultural sectors. Lots of research being done. Or we can kind of simplify it and say, okay, well, in what part of the world do pawpaws love growing?
Right.
And the places that are going to come up, the big one that sort of comes up for me first is Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what is Hawaii?
Bunch of volcanoes.
Bunch of volcanoes.
Yeah.
All right. So anything volcanic, direct towards your pawpaws.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense to me.
It can be, oh, that grows well in Hawaii. Okay, it must like volcanic circumstances. I'll try to create a volcano here at home and grow my pawpaws
That's awesome.
that way.
So
And sulphur would be
so it's keep it simple, like it's
Keep it
not
simple.
complicated.
no.
But then if you see a need, or if something, you have a particular species or tree or plant or whatever,
Yeah.
ask yourself the question: where does it come from? What does it need? What does that what environment does that plant like to grow in
That's
the
right.
most? And then
Yeah.
you just tweak it. But you don't
Yeah.
even have to do that. You just can keep it simple, and everything is gonna
Yeah.
be good.
And it's and I suppose one of the sort of definite permaculture sort of understandings and principles, and I suppose I can explain it in the way where, I forget his first name, Masuno Fukuoka, One Straw Revolution, a Japanese organic farmer. one of the most inspirational books written for the organic movement back in the 70s. What he basically suggests to do, and I suppose this is, I find this topic very relevant to the soil topic, is that when he first got onto a piece of land that he was going to farm, he would basically cultivate an area maybe as large as this table. You know, 2-3 square metres, 4 square metres, cultivate it, and he would then go and collect and bring in collect seeds from all the plants that he would ever want to grow on that place. Okay? And he would broadcast them in that area, water it and see what comes up, and plant them out in the garden. And what didn't come up, don't plant. So it's kind of like, rather than I want to grow cabbages, put your cabbage in and then sort of say, oh, the soil needs this, the soil needs this, the soil needs this, and then spend the rest of your life trying to alter the soil so you can grow your cabbage, chuck the cabbage away and grow a pawpaw. Don't have to alter any soil, and you've got your cabbage equivalent.
That's a very different way of thinking than I believe a lot of us have come to understand about growing veggies in the garden.
Grow the veggies that want to grow there, as opposed to what you want to grow there. Because it's kind of like...
Well, it's because we are a subtropical. So, you know, we need to be growing subtropical foods. We can't have an English garden. We might be able for a month or two.
I think you said this last time. You've got to decide in your own mind, do I want to spend the extra time that it's going to take for this plant to grow and the time it will take for me to make sure it grows? Or do I want to grow a lot of the other things that happily grow where I have to spend less time growing them? You know, it's making that choice, isn't it?
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right. Just to add to that too, you know, like I have found that plants can be particular. Like I put plants in various spots around the garden. If I just say, okay, well, I'm going to plant you here and you have to do your thing, it may not, because, you know, that the sunlight might not be quite right, or there might be something in the soil it doesn't read, or might be planted next to something it doesn't really like. I find you put a few in the garden in various spots and you'll see which one's growing well, you know. And it's like, oh, that one's growing really well. That one's not. I wonder why. It doesn't matter why. Just put some more in where it's growing well.
Yeah. Good. That is a very good piece of advice. So we might head out into the garden and do a bit of walking around and having a look at examples of where you guys grow your soil or build your soil.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.